What's up, YouTube? Back at you with another video, another quick take. I got my main man, my partner, my road dog.
I normally start off with the charismatic man slogan, but you know what? This topic, I can't bring myself to do that. But thanks for having me, man.
Yes, sir. So we have an article courtesy of CBSNews.com, which says five former Memphis police officers have been fired and charged with murder in the death of Tyre Nichols, a black man who died 3 days after a violent traffic stop. Video footage of Nichols' arrest was released Friday evening. His family urged any demonstrators to protest peacefully. Authorities have released few details on what led to Nichols' arrest and what exactly happened after he was pulled over. Here is what we know so far about his death. Now, this is a lengthy article, so bear with me. It says, who was Tyre Nichols and what do we know about his arrest? Nichols, a 29-year-old father who worked at FedEx, has been described by friends and family as an avid skateboarder. He lived in Sacramento before moving to Memphis, and his friends from his teenage years in California spoke to CBS Sacramento about how much joy he brought to those around him. He says, I know Tyre. I know how great he was, said Jerome Neal, who had just visited Nichols in Memphis in November. I see him interacting with almost everybody at the skate park when I'm with him. He was just well loved. The article goes on to say that on the night of January 7th, Nichols was returning home from a suburban park where he had taken photos of the sunset, according to his family's attorneys. On the way home, he was stopped for reckless driving, according to a statement from the Memphis Police Department. As officers approached Nichols to arrest him, a confrontation occurred, and Nichols ran away, police said. A second confrontation also occurred at some point before Nichols was ultimately arrested. Memphis Police Director Saralyn Davis later said in a January 27th interview on CNN that investigators have not been able to substantiate the initial report of reckless driving. Police said that following the arrest, Nichols complained of having shortness of breath, at which time an ambulance was called. Nichols was taken to a hospital in critical condition, police said. 3 days later, on January 10th, Nichols succumbed to his injuries. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation said, but did not elaborate on what those injuries were. Gee, I wonder why. An official cause of death has not been released. So, basically, I caught wind of this. I'd say sometime yesterday. I guess maybe the last day and a half, and I have to be totally honest. I kind of feel that these situations are so frequent that I'm not surprised, and that's almost a bad thing, or
Right.
that is a bad thing. That's very unfortunate, and I guess I can say that there is a level of numbness to it in a sense. And once I heard about the whole notion of the body cam footage being released, we already talked about it last night. We already said, I didn't want to watch it because when these things happen, I see myself in these black people, in these victims, and I just can't bring myself to see something like that. And before I get your thoughts, I just want to just throw this out there again. Um, I take no pleasure in the, I guess, quote unquote reporting of these sorts of situations and talking about these things. And again, the purpose of quick takes is to provide an alternative perspective on situations like these, or just, again, things that happen in general in the media, and in a way that you don't hear other people talking about it. So, bro, what are your thoughts on this whole situation?
Man. Since I've heard about this, my opinions has changed, and not for the better. Um, this I know people are gonna disagree, some people might push back, but this was worse than Emmett Till, what I saw. Um,
Mm,
it that I'm truly lost for words. The amount of violence these black officers did to this 29-year-old black man. I don't care if white officers get scot free. I don't care. They deserve prison. They deserve life in prison.
mm,
Um, I watched some of the video, and before I watched the video, we talked about it. I saw the
mm,
photo of Tyre in the hospital. I mean, this dude looked like Emmett Till when the picture of Emmett Till, that's what he looked like in that
Uh,
hospital bed. And
mm,
watching that video, you know, before I even get into this video, let me say this. I used to be one of those people that just said, "Hey, don't run for the cops. If you run for the cops, you making your bed and you got to lie in it." You know what? My opinion has changed because watching this video and other videos of other black men and black women getting killed, I realized just because you run for police do not mean they get to treat you like this. They don't get to, for instance, they pull him over and this is supposed to be a simple traffic stop.
mm-hmm.
Why are they harassing this man? Why are they threatening to pepper spray him? So of course, we see in the media what's happening with the police and black civilians. He's running. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what? I don't blame him. But you know what they do? They catch up to him. And what they do, they start stomping him out, kicking him in
Wow.
his face, his ribs. One of the officers watching, then all of a sudden he decides he want to get a couple licks in because he can't be the only one who don't hit him. So he
Wow.
takes out his baton, start hitting him. Then all of a sudden, they pick him up. He starts slumping off of the police car. They go for round two. But this
Wow.
time they pepper spray this man. He's pleading, yo, man, come on, man. I just want to go home crying. Yo, I just want to talk to my mother. And they still swinging on him with batons, kicking him in his face.
Mm-hmm.
They even picked him up, taking turns clocking him in his face.
Wow.
I mean, this is like the modern version of Emmett Till. I'm not talking about some UFC, WWE style. The ref jumps in and stops it. No, this is a brutal, brutal, vicious assault. And the
Mm-hmm.
sad part about it is we saw what happened with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. That was a cakewalk to what I just watched. That was a
Right.
cakewalk, and that's sad to say.
Mm-hmm.
But 4 or 5 black officers doing it to this black man, throw him away, lock him up. I don't care what people say.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter. I don't care. They're not speaking up. I'm going to say this. It's time for us as black people to stop making excuses for black on black violence. And I will say, even though it's scripted, I was watching Law and Order, years ago. And I remember this quote Ice-T used to say. He used to say, this is about an incident involving people in the projects. He said, "Look, I'm gonna be real with you. There's people that look like us on the police force, but the reality of it is, who's the biggest gang in America? The police. So those black men, they may look like us, but a lot of them, when they put on that shield,
They
they're
blew.
taking an oath. They
They blew.
blew.
They blew.
They're not going to treat you the same way. And
Right.
it's sad because you know I have people like Natalie. I have other people. Yo, man, how's this affecting you? Yeah, I want you to be safe out here. Like, this is the first time in my mind that I actually feel like, shit, I ain't even safe. Because at this,
Mm-hmm.
if your own
Right.
people can do this to you, and they know what's happening, we talking
Right.
about black people who seen what's happening on the news, and they do
Mm-hmm.
that to you. Bro, lock them up. I don't want no
Yeah.
sympathy. No, I don't care what Derek Chauvin did. Nope, throw them away. They got it. They got to serve time, and I
Right.
hope they spend the rest of their life in prison because this is disgusting. It's
Right.
absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. So, because I want this to be more of a definitive conversation on the topic, I'm just going to read another article
Right.
from CNN, which basically says the 5 former Memphis police officers who were fired for their actions during the arrest of Tyre Nichols earlier this month were indicted on charges including murder and kidnapping. And I'm also going to add, apparently, that this happened a lot faster than, let's say, their white counterparts. It says the
Right.
former officers, Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, Justin Smith, Emmett Martin, and Desmond Mills Jr. have each been charged with second-degree murder, aggravated assault, 2 charges of aggravated kidnapping, 2 charges of official misconduct, and 1 charge of official oppression, Mulroy said. A second-degree murder is defined in Tennessee as a knowing killing of another and is considered a Class A felony punishable by between 15 to 60 years in prison. The criminal charges come about 3 weeks after Nichols, 29-year-old black man, so on and so forth. Now, here's something that President Biden said, which is kind of part of why I wanted to talk about it in addition to a couple of other things. But he says, The killing is a painful reminder that we must do more to ensure that our criminal justice system lives up to the promise of fair and impartial justice, equal treatment, and dignity for all. Now, my response to that is, now for listeners out there, you look at my channel between now and 2020. So I would say within the last 3 years, I've always made a point to kind of talk about the real things that are going on in this country as it pertains to Black people. So generally speaking, I've always, used my YouTube to talk about the real things that are going on. For me, YouTube and having a voice is not just about entertainment and, things that don't matter. And I've always been a big proponent or advocate for legislation exclusive for Black people. All right. See, when the Asian community, Asian people were going through it in this country, and they had some instances of violence against them in particular, they got the Stop Asian Hate bill immediately after that. It didn't take very long for the government to step up to put things in place to protect them. A lot of people have been going through it in this country for hundreds of years, but, let's just be specific. In the last decade or so, there's been this constant instances of police brutality and killings since 2011 with Trayvon Martin. Right. And as these things have been happening, I've always asked myself, at what point is enough enough? I got kind of pissed off when, in one of the articles, and I'm not going to read it because I'd have to go out and find it, but it said that the city of Memphis, New York, and LA, Atlanta, so on and so forth, they are encouraging people to peacefully protest. Now, my thing is, since the early 2010s, so let's say since 2011, what has protesting ever amounted to since then? Because these things keep happening.
Right.
So all that tells me is there's no amount of protesting that's going to change things and create tangible improvements for the lives of Black people. See, you said that now, this situation happening, especially you're seeing, Black officers, beating up and killing Black men. Now you starting to feel, afraid for your personal safety around police officers. I've been feeling like that. Now, my thing is, what are they going to do to prevent these things from happening? I've been saying this for years. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, I get it. People are protesting and they're showing their collective grief and anger at the situation. But along with that, you need demands. You need some sort of organization. You have to ask for something. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like,
right.
You have to say, all right, we want Black legislation that is going to protect Black people in the presence, custody of law enforcement. Aspects of that legislation that will hold them accountable. So before a police officer decides to swing on you or be violent against you, he has to realize that there's going to be a whole slew of consequences that are going to come as a result of that, choice that he decides to make against you, God forbid. And right. Then that's also going to affect his whole entire police department and probably the institution of law enforcement in general. None of these things are in place. So that's why these things are constantly happening over and over and over and over again, because every single time a police officer decides to pull his gun on somebody, beat him down, beat him up, do a whole bunch of stuff, they're not afraid of anything. They're not afraid of anything. And some people are not afraid to go to jail. Clearly, these guys aren't. You know what I'm saying? They're like, yo, what's the worst that can happen to us? Oh, we go to jail? All right, cool. They're not really afraid of anything. But let's say if they had to pay restitution, like there's so many things that we really need to be focusing on outside of getting justice. You get what I'm saying? Because there's so many Tyre Nichols out there in this country. These things are happening all the time, every other day, every week. The only difference is that this was a situation that just crossed over into mainstream media to the point where we talking about it. But I already know that as we speak right now, there's a Black man out there somewhere, a Black woman out there somewhere that's getting pulled over right now.
Right.
and are afraid for their life. That's facts.
Yeah.
People say, oh, well, police have a tendency to be brutal or kill, white people more. But then again, how come I'm not really hearing about these situations like that? Let's be real. Like every time, I cut up on the news and I hear about these things, I always see people that look like me. So what do we do now? Because my thing is, I'm a solution-oriented guy. So it's like it's but so much we could talk about the problem. Now, what can we do to solve it or to change things? And you got to hold these guys accountable. So if you're going to be out there protesting, right, you got to ask for something. Have a list of demands. And if these demands are not met, then you have to, impose some sort of collective consequences or something like that. But you have to ask for black legislation because guess what? Think about it. These things happen every year. Annually, there's always like that one, situation where a black man gets killed by the police every year, pretty much. Like there's always that one story that always crosses over every year.
Right.
I could Google it right now. There's always one black man and a black woman for every single year since 2011. Sandra Bland died in police custody. Yep. Eric Garner got killed for selling cigarettes. And he wasn't even doing anything. Every single year, it's always something. So we get it. Police brutality is wrong. We are second-class citizens in this goddamn country. That is the reason why I can go on TikTok and I see these police TikTok videos, and then I see the white guy in the car, and then he's legit mouthing off the police officer, like verbally, belittling and berating the police officer. And the reason why he's doing that is because he knows, like, the rights, like the Bill of Rights or amendments or whatever, it actually applies to him. You know what I'm saying? Like, you get pulled over by a cop, you call a cop a bitch, he's gonna bash your window in, rip you out of the car, beat your ass, take you to jail. A white person can do that, and then, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I seen a video, and it was a white guy, so it was a police officer, he pulled him over. And the police officer said, I want your license and registration. Dude was spent 10 minutes refusing to give this guy his license and registration. I was literally laying there. I'm like, yo, I know for a fact a black person couldn't do that. Otherwise, that window would not be there. That window would not be there. So the playing field, even if these things do happen to white people, the playing field is not even. It's not even. Facts. It's not. So, that's my opinion on that.
Yeah. Let me a couple points I want to make. One of the mistakes these officers made, and it's something you said, mistaken they was going to get off scot-free. Why? Well, just because they may feel like they represent Team Blue. They are black people at the end of the day. So they're not Derek Chauvin. They don't get that privilege, which is why they are in the slammer right now, and they're facing, felony charges now. I would say a lot of people are saying, oh, well, these white officers, they get away with doing it all the time. Okay. I see your point there. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about an innocent 29-year-old black man who's begging, pleading for his life, didn't assault the police. He ran because they was antagonizing him. They were starting trouble with him. He wasn't a hood rat dude who was looking for trouble. He was just a guy who got pulled over for a simple traffic stop and got his life taken away. Why? Because, 5 black officers didn't like the tone that he had. So what they do, I watched these videos of, and I couldn't watch all of it, so I had to start reading transcripts of it. And I mean, you got officers pepper spraying this guy while he's on the floor begging for his mother, and they laughing at him, not calling for medical attention. And then all of a sudden, they get a whiff of that pepper spray they hit him with. They get mad, and now they start charging at him again with batons, kicking him in his face and his ribs. I mean, on reality, that could be me. That could be you. That could be our brother. That could be our sister. That could be our cousin. That could be any one of us. And that's the point for me. These guys deserve first-degree charges. I'm sorry. They unfortunately, they are, one of the statistics, and they may not be white, have that white privilege, but what they did was exactly what the white people did to Emmett Till. The only difference was they're not white. They're black, and they did it to their own people. And that's the most upsetting part, which is why, for me, I say I'm more afraid, because now walking down the street, I can't run. I might have to think twice about running to that black cop because now I'm thinking about what happened with this guy. And what if they don't got my back? They're going to have their partner back. So, you know, that's one thing. Two, I agree with you. You know, throughout the whole pandemic from 2020 to now, when we talked about George Floyd, when we talked about Black Lives Matter and everything, I always said protesting is not enough. And I look, I appreciate people taking the time out their day to protest. But unfortunately, this is what 3 years removed from George Floyd. And how many high-profile black deaths have we seen by the hands of the police? It's not changing. The problem is Black Lives Matter. I'm gonna call them out. I haven't seen anybody from Black Lives Matter say anything about this. I'm sorry. Just because it wasn't a white person don't mean nothing. It's time for you to speak up. If you're talking about innocent black lives being taken by the police, this is a prime example. And I think people need, like you said, they need to start asking for legislation. They need to start holding these people accountable. A slap on the wrist? No. These officers, unfortunately, they're using these black officers as, as the what's the term? As the face of the new political agenda because they're black. They don't got the same privilege. So they disposable. You could get another black officer in there. So now they're going to be sitting in prison probably for the rest of their life and thinking about, oh man, I thought I would have got off like Devin Chavon did. No, you're not privileged like him. You may be on his team, but your skin color is different. So for me, I have demands. I think there's ways we can improve. One, like you said, black legislation. This whole, walking down the street, and there's no disrespect to protest, but that's not getting nowhere. We need a complete revisionary of the police force. We need better qualifications. We need better training. Every year they need to be in training, taking psych evals, all that, because what happens is a lot of these officers, they might pass that test, when they get into the police academy, then it stops. So now, 5-10 years, you're a veteran, everybody love you, you get favoritism. And unfortunately, when you're protecting the public or when you're serving the public, there should be no favoritism. If people are complaining about you harassing them, planting drugs in their car, there needs to be investigations. I don't care how much of a favoritism or how much of a nice guy you think this guy is.
Yeah, well, but see, I feel you. But see, and this is something that Malcolm X was going to do back in the day. See, because I saw a picture of people in Newark protesting, and on a couple of the signs, it says protect civil rights. Now, here's the thing. These things are constantly happening. It's no longer a civil rights issue, and it's a human rights issue. And by definition, violation of human rights means any action or inaction which deprives a participant of any of his or her legal rights as articulated in law or in these regulations. And then the 14th Amendment basically says the 14th Amendment granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, including formerly enslaved people, and provided all citizens with equal protections under the laws. So meaning, if you get pulled over by a cop and anything happens to you, that is a violation of your 14th Amendment. Therefore, because this is a chronic problem in this country, that's a human rights violation. So the conversation is completely different. So you can't respond to this type of issue and say, we want justice, or this is a civil rights issue, because it's not anymore.
Right. Well, this is why I believe wholeheartedly that they need better people in office, people who care about the public's opinion about the police department.
No, it's not that. You need legislation. That's it. Because my thing is, if I was in charge, or if I had some sort of say, if I was a political figure with some sort of, pull in these sorts of situations, my thing is, all right, so it stops at Tyre Nichols. And then what can you guys do for us to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody again? Because sorry, and whatever it is that Biden says, and then, the Memphis Police Department, because they disbanded the unit that those 5 officers work for. To me, I don't even care about that, because that's still not going to stop this from happening again. So the conversation is, what needs to be done so this doesn't happen again, and you hold these people accountable. You give them a time limit because you ask for it. Because see, the thing is, rioting and looting and all of that, you don't do that just because, like what they were doing years ago. You do that in the absence of what you asked for, in the absence of the fulfilling of your demands. That's when you execute some sort of consequences and some sort of pushback or something. Like revoke, like people buying stuff or something. Like there are things that you can do other than marching down the street with signs, because what if it happens again next year? Then it defeats the purpose of people being out protesting right now, in my opinion.
Oh, I completely agree. And the only reason why I said, we need better people in power, because I do agree with legislation, but unfortunately a lot of these police departments are run by people who have they have their favorite buddy on the force. They probably have a whole family unit in the department, so a lot of favoritism and nepotism goes into that. I think for me is this whole protesting against the police is like a relationship where someone is constantly cheating. I'm gonna keep cheating on you, and I know you're gonna throw a fit, you're gonna break a couple glasses, but
in reality, you're not gonna go nowhere.
Yeah, 2 days later, you're gonna be sitting right, begging for my attention again, and that's the problem. Like you said, people are protesting, but there's no demands. The only way for this to happen is for people, especially people who have a significant platform. We need a strategy here. We need
organization. You need real organization, not no fake Black Lives Matter, because that didn't amount to anything tangible in the last 3 years. And I'm looking at a picture of people protesting in Times Square yesterday, and to me that's not going to solve nothing. Giving police officers out there a hard time is not going to solve anything. It's not strategic. When you're dealing in politics and you want to enforce some sort of political change, it's chess, not checkers. And I get it. Like, it's well-intentioned. I see the signs that say the people demand end police terror, but all right, tell them how you want them to do it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like you tell them how you want them to do it. You ask for something specific, because that's so general. End police terror. What does that mean? If I'm a politician, or if I'm a legislator or something, well, what does that mean to me?
Right. And you're right. And it's like a business deal. When you come to the table or anything in life, you go to your boss, I want a raise, but you don't have no idea how much you want a raise of. I just want a raise. Well, that could mean 25 cents, that could mean a nickel, so now it's up to their discretion. And that's the problem. Like I said, I appreciate people protesting. I'm not trying to take anything away from that, but the problem is we have seen, especially in the last 3 years, it has not done anything. And it's time that people need to start. I think this is the first time we're going to see officers, unfortunately, because they are Black, but regardless of the fact, the crime they committed, they deserve it. But we're finally going to see some swift justice. Man, this needs to be the norm. There's
plenty of officers out there, just like those 5 guys. And
right.
My thing is, all right, so what's going to stop, other officers just like them from doing that? Even if, let's say, you might have the most racist a police commissioner or sergeant, whomever's in charge of the local precinct and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, law enforcement still answers to the law. So when you put a law in place that protects a certain amount of people, they can't go against that. Otherwise, they're the lawbreakers. But what law are these guys really breaking? Because there's nothing contemporary or modern in place for Black people these days.
Oh, you're 100%. There's no protection. There's no laws, no policies. The system is broken. The police, and let me first say this. I know a lot of people may not like it, but I don't inherently hate all police officers, because I've met some great police officers who could have, took me to jail for hopping the turnstile my 5th time, and they just gave me a pep talk and let me go about my way. There are some nice people, but unfortunately, the evil always comes to the top, and they dominate the headlines. And what's happening? These people, these 5 Black officers, Derek Chauvin, everybody else that's committed these violent acts against civilians, they're making everybody else feel afraid of the police. And I think this is why swift justice for these officers need to be held. And then any other action restitution, like you said. Yo, his family, and I'm not trying to say this as for like a quick payday, but they deserve some money. If he has kids, they deserve
You gotta
money.
pay You gotta pay restitution for that
You know what I'm saying? I was hearing
out of their pockets, and then if that particular offending officer doesn't have the money, then that whole police department has got to pay. So that's what I'm saying. That's what's gonna, because what that officer does is literally gonna affect that whole entire establishment that he works for. So he's not gonna want to do that, because by hurting you or hurting another black man or woman, he's hurting them. So he's gonna be like, oh damn, you know what? I want to whoop his ass. I want to kill him, but I can't, because if I do, then I'm putting, my fellow officers at, potential, risk or economic risk, something like that. So they're not going to do it. But if these things are not in place, then there's nothing stopping them from doing that. Even if they get charged with murder, even if they go to jail and stuff like it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Because to me, that's not enough, in my opinion. And what's funny, I actually want to read this because, I've always heard that, black people are, 3/5 a citizen and second-class citizens in this country. And then there's really nothing in the media that can prove me otherwise, because it seems like it's true. And it says the 3/5 clause was a part of a series of compromises enacted by the Constitutional Convention of 1787. The most notable other clauses prohibited slavery in the Northwest Territories and ended U.S. participation in the international slave trade in 1807, which is crazy because this wasn't even that long ago. Anyway, these compromises reflected Virginia Constitutional Convention delegate James Madison's observation that the states were divided into different interests, not by their size, but principally from their having or not having of slaves. And then eventually it says, with the convention seemingly at an impasse, Charles Pinckney, it's a strange last name, proposed a compromise. 3/5 of the number of slaves in any particular state would be added to the total number of free white persons, including bond servants, but not Indians, to the estimated number of congressmen each state would send to the House of Representatives. The compromise was not completely original. This ratio had already been established by the Congress, which adopted the Articles of Confederation in 1781 as the basis for national taxation. It says, although the 3/5 compromise and others regarding slavery helped hold this new fragile union of states together, many on both sides of the issue were opposed. James Madison and Edmund Randolph of Virginia used the phrase quotas of contribution to argue that slaves should be fully counted one for one, and opposed the compromise. It ends by saying the 3/5 clause remained in force until the post-Civil War 13th Amendment freed all enslaved people in the United States. The 14th Amendment gave them full citizenship. And maybe people are not really that's not clicking, because most people are not, and even me, I'm not going to act like I knew this off bat and I could just, say this, off the top of my mind. But most people are not historically privy and really know what's going on and really know how much they're just being violated. Because when you look at it, it almost seems like you're just being violated on a surface level. Like, oh, okay, he got beaten up and then he died of his injuries later. These cops are going to jail. That's justice and that's it. And then not realizing that it's a human rights violation. And then the thing is, and here's something that Malcolm said, and that's one of the reasons why he's not here, because of what he was trying to do. But you can't ask the bully to do anything for you, because the bully don't like you in the first place. And I remember when we were talking about Ryan Coogler and how he was just at the bank and then he pretty much almost died if he didn't compose himself, just trying to take out $12,000, make a $12,000 withdrawal out of the bank. And I said, yo, you can't ask a country to do something for you when history has shown that this country never liked you in the first place. So what was Malcolm X going to do? He was going to transform it from a civil rights issue into a human rights issue and take that issue to NATO abroad. So to put what the United States is doing on the world stage and say, this is what they're doing to us. This is a human rights violation. That's what the conversation has to be. So it's like, literally, if I could talk to Joe Biden, I'd say, look, listen, these are human rights violations that have been taking place over the last 10 plus years. Okay. So what are you going to do about it? A certain demographic of people, which we, make up the majority relative to white people. So what's stopping what happened to Tyre to happening to the average? I'm not even going to say what's stopping from what happened to Tyre Nichols to happening to anybody else. And my thing is, I would say to him, your inaction tells me everything that I need to know. So henceforth from that conversation, if there is not any, if my terms are not being met, and I mean, I already know this anyway, but that would just tell me the type of person that he is. Because you see who these politicians jump to aid and who they don't. Like, let's say last year, a gunman went up to a supermarket in Buffalo and killed 12 black people. He went up to a white cashier and said, "Oh, nah, I'm not here to kill you," and killed everybody else. Then in Texas, elementary school, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm correct, because that happened a while ago, got shot up. He went down there. He didn't go to Buffalo. Nobody said anything. It's almost as if like that happened just to get people to stop talking about what happened in Buffalo. So what are we doing here? Because that's all the conversation has to be. So if we're going to make signs that say this is a human rights violation. These are the terms that we need. But when you don't have a leader, when you don't have any organization, and then anybody can just decide to just jump in and then, start protesting and all of that, that's literally just like a body with no head. Yeah, it can walk, it can do certain things, but where is it going? It doesn't know where it's going. And then what happens? It doesn't go anywhere anytime soon. Because that's all I see these protests really doing. And no disrespect to anybody that's out there doing it. I mean, hey, fine. But I'm just saying, like, my mentality, is what part of that is going to prevent it happening 2 months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 2 years from now. Because if it happens again, then all the protesting that's going on right now is a freaking waste of time. It's all a waste of time. If it right or wrong, if it happens again, all the protests mean nothing. Because technically, George Floyd died in vain. Because you would think with all the civil unrest that happened 3 years ago, all the rioting, protesting, fake ass Black Lives Matter, this, that, and the third, you would think that would have meant for something, and that would have prevented that happening from the next black man or woman, for it to happen again and again and again and again. So that's why I have the opinion that I have for those that are listening, because I don't want it to happen again. So if I'm a public figure and I got people that look to me for some sort of, cultural, social, political guidance, like a Dr. Umar Johnson or somebody, that's what I would say. That's what I would say collectively. What do my people feel that the demands should be? You present it to the people that can do something about it. And if they refuse, these are the consequences as a result of your political inaction. Because again, Black people don't have a sovereign country that is looking out for us. They don't. We don't. Because you see, like, let's say something like that happened to a Filipino person. You don't think the Philippines are going to come out and say something?
My bad. What you said?
You weren't listening.
No, I was paying attention. I was thinking because you had mentioned about figures, and I gotta give a shout out to the Celtics basketball player Joe Mazzulla, because he before the game today, he did a whole press conference about Tyre Nichols, talking about it. And this is the stuff that I talk about. The people with the power, with the audience speaking up, because like you said, up until this point, there's only been protests. Nothing has changed. And too many Black people are dying. And before I go on, I also want to say this. I've said this before, that people need to stop waiting until something happens to them or someone they love, because it happens all the time. People walk down these streets. People watch these clips of Black people, well, even white people getting murdered by the police, and they don't care. They move on about their day. It can happen to any one of us. I'm sure Tyre, when he was getting pulled over for a simple traffic stop, he didn't think he was going to get his life ended. So I think people need to realize this can happen to you at any moment in time.
Well, what did he
And
say at the press conference?
he talked about how, um, he was basically talking about the police force and how people praise negativity in the world, talking about, the dangers of social media and how people are saying, black people need to stop resisting the police and they wouldn't be put in this situation. I wasn't able to watch all of it, but
Well,
basically he was talking.
people that are full of crap, but we know those people are out there,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
because the point is that compliance in the presence of police, sometimes it don't even matter. If they want to put hands on you, be violent against you, it's gonna happen whether you with it or not. You've seen it,
Exactly.
like a guy will already have his hands up, and then they'll just shoot him just because, and he's just standing there with his hands up. That's happened so many times. So my thing is like, and I get it, like respect to whomever that basketball player is that talked about it, but my thing is, it's but so long we can keep talking about the obvious because it gets redundant at that point because it's the same conversation. How are you going to have the same conversation 10 years in a row?
You're right.
So that's why it's like, yo, human rights violation, legislation demands some sort of collective consequences that you impose on said people. I don't think looting and rioting is going to change anything. You know what I'm saying? And even with peaceful protests, we've already had guys like undercover guys secretly infiltrate the protests to try to sabotage and make it look like it was a violent protest because they did that. So even that doesn't even really mean anything. Like, I don't know if you remember how they would bring like pallets of bricks for people to start throwing stuff.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
like stuff like that. So that just goes to show you already have saboteurs already in the vicinity, like just ready and willing to ruin a whole peaceful protest. So that's why it's ineffective. And we don't have, black people don't have any political power. We really don't. We really don't. And even then, I remember I was reading a couple of weeks ago about I guess like the new Black Panther Party, and then they're all over the place. They're all over the place. Like just reading about them just goes to show that it's the same thing. It's like a body with no head. That's what we need. That's what we need.
It's sad. I just found out an interesting statistic about this whole ordeal. I wouldn't say a statistic, but more a fact. Obviously the officers that committed this crime are black, but the police chief is black, the victim is black, and apparently CNN is calling this racism hate crime. Um, Me personally, I don't really know about this whole racism hate crime thing.
Why
But
not?
because this is for me, this is uh abuse of power. For instance, I've watched countless interviews from police officers, doing interviews, especially in the height of George Floyd, talking about their training and certain issues regarding George Floyd and the police and whatever the case may be. The problem with the police force is one, favoritism, two, the lack of training, two, the lack of resources, and four, the lack of accountability. Meaning, a lot of these officers, maybe there was the dude in high school getting beat up on. Now they think, okay, I get a gun. I'm more powerful than you.
I don't even think it's that. And I've heard that narrative, a lot. And the thing is, like, you don't think or you've ever heard that these police officers, they get told to go harder on black people. Like, have you not heard that before?
I've heard that before.
Because to me, that's all that it is. You don't think there's Uncle Ruckus type of black people out there that hate themselves and then they take it out on black men that they see? I've even seen this scene from Boys in the Hood pretty much start to float around the internet. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the film, but it's a scene in the movie where Morris Chestnut's character and Cuban Gooden Jr.'s character, they get pulled over, and all Cuban Gooden Jr. says is, or his character's name is Trey. All Trey says is that I didn't do nothing, and then the cop is like, "Oh, you think you tough?" And then he's already has a gun. He's already got a gun to his head. That's the same. That's literally the same situation. That's exactly why that's been floating around, because that's the only, as crazy as it sounds, that's the only like film scene that you can really equate that to. It's the same thing. So it's not really, these people's upbringing is, it, just provide some sort of explanation, because it's not that. I honestly do think it's racist. You can Black people can hate each other. Like, that's a fact. It exists.
You're right. You're right. But hold on. Let me clarify something real quick. When I mean by power, I mean some officers. Unfortunately, when you give someone, a gun, a badge, and you tell them, protect the people, people automatically respect you because, one, they know if they get online, you can turn that gun on at any moment on them. So there's always going to be that perceived threat and that authority. So imagine, I've made this comment, and even though it's not the same situation, but directors not hiring actors for a big project because the actress or actor remind them of the ex-husband or the ex-wife, little petty stuff like that. Now imagine a cop who's having a bad day, just got an argument with his wife before his shift. He gets on the shift, he pulls somebody over, the slightest attitude, he looks at him like, you think you better than me now? Because for me, the only reason why I bring that up is, when I watch the video and I read the transcript of the videos, it's like these officers took every little perceived slight that they thought he was given to them and took it out on him. Oh, put your hands up. If you don't put your hands up, I'm going to beat you with this baton. And then even when he put his hands up, they still beat him. Yeah.
But let me ask you something. Do you think that would have happened if it was a white person? If it was a white skater? Same archetype,
no.
except he's white.
No.
And why do you think that is? Because it stems from racism. Because
you're right.
Everything, they're trained to do that. It's like when they get hired, these are things that you come to find out along the lines of being a police officer, whether a police officer wants to admit it or not. Maybe it might not be as prevalent in all police departments, but it is a thing in America. That is a fact. And everything that they were doing is basically tells me everything about who they work for, because that came from somewhere. And I'm pretty sure that was not the first time, or rather, I'm pretty sure they have been like physically intimidating Black, people in their communities for a while. This was just the worst. That's just the worst that it's gotten. But to me, it is a race issue. Yes, it is. You can be a Black person can be racist against themselves. A Black person can hate themselves, because all 5 of those police officers, they hate themselves. Facts. Because to kill that Black man, you know what I'm saying, that looks just like me, that looks just like you, they kill themselves. Facts. Killing Tyre was them killing themselves. Because I see myself, I'm looking right at him right now. Like, he had a daughter. Like, they didn't think about that. That's what I'm saying. Nope. Like it's a hate crime. It is a racially motivated hate crime. Because if they were to do the same thing to a white person, Latino, Middle Eastern, Asian, then it's not. But in this case scenario, we know for a fact they wouldn't have done that to a white boy. They wouldn't have done that to a Hispanic dude. They wouldn't have done that to an Asian. They wouldn't have done that to an Indian person, because they know what would come with that if they do that to those types of people. But they knew the worst thing that's going to happen to us is we're going to go to jail, and they're not going to be in jail forever. Or that's their mentality. Facts.
Right.
So let's call a spade a spade. That's what it is.
Me personally, it's just the only reason I brought it up is because sometimes also a lot of the reason why a lot of these situations turn deadly is a lot of ego. A lot of these people don't deserve to be carrying guns. Some people are power hungry. Imagine a person nobody's ever really cared besides your family, but nobody ever really looked at you as like, I want to be like this guy. People respected you. You give someone like that a gun and a badge, they're going to abuse that power. And a lot of these police officers, the reason why situations like this turn deadly is they're abusing their power. There was no reason for them. You might be 100% right when you said this is racially motivated.
I am right.
But this situation didn't have to escalate as quickly as it did. They didn't have to get all aggressive with him within 2 minutes of pulling him over. It's just little stuff like a lot of police
because
officers
they
like that.
because they already had it made up in their minds that they were going to do that before they even got out of the car. That was the plan. That was the goal. That was the intention, to beat this boy to death, pretty much. They knew that already. That had nothing to do with whatever it is that they said. He resisted, he ran away. They already knew they were going to do that anyway. They had their minds made up from jump.
No, you're right. You're right.
That was intentional. That was an intentional act of violence. It had nothing to do with him doing whatever, because, and especially, that's not their job. I feel like police officers, they've also forgotten their role in society. Technically, they're public servants. People's taxes are their paychecks. Basically, that's where their money comes from. That's what funds the damn police department, and they forgot that. That's why, like I said in the beginning, police officers are the biggest gang in America. That is a fact.
Yep,
and they operate like that because it's like if you were to like walk around in a bad area as a black man in this day and age, you're probably not going to be more, you're going to be more worried about police than you are about the local thug dude, probably.
Right.
Because a local thug dude is probably going to start with you because you probably did something to him. But police, you didn't even got to do nothing. It's like, that's why they say driving while black, walking while black. He died because he was black.
Right. Thank God for police body cams, and I'm glad a lot of states are starting to enforce that.
Yeah, but it doesn't even, but when has a police body cam ever stopped a black man dying before?
It hasn't stopped them, but now we have the evidence to prove, because let's face it, black people in other races have been being killed by police on daily basis. But the problem is, a lot of times it's not caught on footage. So now, for instance, I was reading, transcript of the last video, after Tyre gets medical attention, the police are recounting the event. They're making it seem like he's the one who attacked them. But then they get the body cam footage. No, that's not what happened. They physically abused him, which is why I feel like this needs to be a requirement. And I get it, the lack of funding for a lot of areas. If you live in a smaller town, you're probably not going to have the same funding as a New York City police department. But I say every police department needs better funding. Need funding for people to have body cams, for someone to monitor these body cams, because even if it don't stop, well, let me not say that. Even if another black person gets killed, we have evidence. So these officers can't just say, "Oh,
they can't lie about it."
Yeah, they can't lie about it. And so often, a lot of times, these officers get away with it because there's no police body cam evidence to dissuade what they say. And what happens? You're a police officer, so the jury and and the prosecutor and everybody else who has the power to lock this person up, they believe the police officer right over a regular civilian. So
let me ask you something though. See, but these guys, because it was body cam footage that was released, correct?
Right, but they was blocking it. So it was only audio.
Were blocking it?
They was blocking it, yeah.
But you see, oh my gosh. See, that just goes to show, like, this is just like, oh my God. Like, oh man, like I really wish like I had some sort of direct line with somebody that, was in charge or you know what I'm saying? Like somebody that can press that button and then really start to enforce the change that I tell them to, because the point that I was going to make was, I'm like, see, these guys know that they're wearing body cams and that's not stopping them. That's why I'm like, yeah, body cams was cool, but it's still not preventing anything, because these things are still happening even with the addition of body cams on the person of every single police officer. So to me, I still don't even really view that as like a real deterrent. Yes, it's useful, like you said, because it provides evidence and context to a situation. So it's visual context at that, because that way it's not just left to, oh, he say, she say, because like you said, they're going to obviously go with the law enforcement and believe him over a black person, especially in the court of law. They're not going to believe you.
Right.
But to me, it's not a real deterrent.
No, absolutely not. But you know what? At least at this point, it's like, when I watch these true crime things, not to get too much off topic, but when I watch a lot of these true crime documentaries about the police things that used to happen back in the day, the amount of criminal activity police were doing and whatever the case may be, people getting
Mm-hmm.
away with crime. The reason why they was doing that was because if you're a police officer, people automatically put you in a higher pedestal. He's an authority. We trust him. He's supposed to protect us. So let's say, you driving in your BMW, right? And a police officer stop you,
Mm-hmm.
right? He don't got no body cam. And the
Mm-hmm.
situation turns violent. Who they when it goes to the court of law and the police officer says, yeah, I pulled him over and he was aggressive. I asked him, show me his ID. He refused. And
Mm-hmm.
I asked him stuff
But
about
it's
the
not
car.
true.
It's not true. And this is what they was doing. They was, talking about this, blocking the camera. And then, one instance they was talking about, oh yeah, he was swerving in and out of track, acting like a maniac. He's still acting like a maniac. And then I guess they forgot to block the camera. They moved their hand, and they got that. You see him on video slumped over the car,
Wow.
struggling to
Oh my
breathe.
gosh.
That's what I
Heinous.
that's
Heinous
what I'm saying.
acts.
That's
Heinous
what
acts, man.
that's the only reason why I say body cams need to be introduced to every police force. I get it, the budget may not be there for everybody, but some sort of video, audio, something, because so often a lot of reason why if we get on video, it's harder for these police officers to get away from scot-free. Now, granted, sometimes they still do, but realistically, in a situation like this, they could easily, there's 5 officers. They would be more inclined if there was no video audio evidence. They'd be more inclined to believe them over Tyre if he even if he did survive.
Right.
But they have the video and the audio to prove that whatever they were saying on camera was lying. They was truly lying. So that's what, for me, this would be one of the demands. Body cam footage for every police officer. Once you clock in, you gotta have a body cam. You gotta have one on your car, on your person, because you can have it on your car, but if you can't capture the audio or whatever when you leave the car, then it's kind of useless.
Right.
Something like that. That's a simple demand. Body cams for all. You know why? Because people are more inclined to move carefully when they have a camera above them. You go into a store and this cameras at every corner you turn it, you're gonna be less determined to steal. You know what I'm saying? Or be more, you're going to be less determined to rob a bank. Now, if you're that desperate and stupid, you still might do it. But now we have the evidence that you did it. So a lot of these officers are probably walking around without, body cams, and they know, oh, I'm a police officer. Who do you think they're going to believe? Me or him? Oh, they're going to believe me. So they use that to their advantage, playing drugs in people's car, beating them up. It's not the first time we've heard, civilians getting pulled over for a traffic stop. They come into the police and I busted it open, knocks on their head, and he was acting violent, kicking the door. And then lo and behold, they got
it wasn't true. Yeah, it wasn't even. Yeah, lo and behold, it wasn't even true.
Right. And you know what? Let me say it before I'm gonna let you go, but it was a recent example. I'm forgetting it, but this just happened so recently. It was an episode of Court Cam, real life court case. It was a dude. I forgot what state he was in, but he was getting the police went to go raid his house because he was selling drugs. And he came to the precinct bloodied up, knots all over his face, short and stuff ripped off. And the cop said, we went to his house. He started fighting us. He pulled out guns. He dropped the gun. He went for a knife. He tried to attack us. So we had to, use force. Then it turns around. There was video cameras around in the house. And they saw the video cameras and proved he didn't do that. They literally just beat this dude up and brought him to jail like that. So it's one of those things where if a lot of police officers know, it's not going to just be my word against theirs. We're going to have video. We're going to have audio evidence. So if you try to do something stupid, we're going to catch you. Then they're going to be less likely to do stupid stuff like this. But a lot of these officers, they have favoritism in the police department. The police chief may be buddy. They may be going to golf clubs, with the
well, that's not an excuse. And the thing is, see, law enforcement should not be exempt to the law.
Absolutely.
Law enforcement should not be able to violate someone's, not only their civil rights, but their human rights.
Absolutely.
And that's why, I feel like the conversation really, it's it's a conversation that I feel like we all should have. I feel like there's no such thing as a bad conversation that Black people can have as it pertains to the death of Tyre Nichols and how to hold law enforcement accountable once and for all. But I just believe that it should be a strategic conversation and a very focused conversation with the intention of yielding tangible results. So that way, because we are all upset at the fact that this happened. And yes, we want justice, but I feel like the more fulfilling outcome is to know that this can never happen again.
Absolutely.
So, with that said, what are your thoughts? Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.
Peace.